Let's take a closer look at this with Maleki. He is a former senior official at the U.S. Treasury. Is now a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Miad, it's good to see you. So Qatar said, alongside with what we heard from a U.S. official, that the $6 billion only moves, quote, according to the advancement of negotiations, and so far no transfer has been made. So do you interpret that as if the talks failing or stalling past this deadline, that no money is moved at all?
Thanks for having me on, and great to be back here with you. Yes, I think that what we're seeing here, and let me just give you a little bit of background on the $6 billion in Qatar that the Iranians are domestically messaging as Iran receiving. I think Masoud Pezeshkian, the president, tries to manage its internal domestic market. There is a shortage of foreign currency in Iran's market. There's an inflation rate that is skyrocketing. So he's trying to manage that domestic pressure, while externally they're engaging in these talks, not to resolve disputes, but to manage pressure. Now, the $6 billion, this is not the fund. This is not the type of money that would just flow to the Iranian regime or to Iran. The way it works is that they release those funds incrementally to purchase non-sanctionable goods. Remember, there are non-U.S., non-governmental organizations that are involved in these funds. These are not funds that governments are holding. So the private sector is just going to make their own decisions, a risk-based type of approach to these issues. And they're not going to just move these funds in a direction that 2 or 3 years from now, there's a different administration, different policy, or there's another round of escalations with Iran. And these banks are going to find themselves being penalized for having moved those funds. So the funds would be released incrementally, as I've seen being the case, or Qataris can give Iranians a line of credit, and that's what we're hearing from Wali Buff and others in Iran. That would probably give Iranians better leverage if Qataris move forward with something like that, but it would be very unlikely that the U.S. administration is going to agree to a line of credit.
So how do you monitor that and make sure that if the money that is frozen now and ultimately released, it does go to buy, as the U.S. has said, U.S. agricultural products that would go feed the Iranian people? There's a lot of skepticism about this current regime prioritizing their own people as opposed to maintaining their own coffers to support their proxies and continue to fund terrorism around the world.
That's a really good point, and that's a great question. I got to tell you, I've seen little evidence that the Iranian regime is actually interested in using these funds for humanitarian agricultural commodities. They constantly ask for cash or funds that they can then use however they want. And we know, as you said, they're not going to be investing these funds in their economic prosperity of Iranians. They don't put national interest as a priority. It's really the revolutionary ideology that they would invest in first. Now, the way you monitor this is really the private sector compliance programs. Again, these are banks, these are financial institutions that there's a very small portion of their business that is Iran related, and they don't want to risk their 90, 80, 70% of their non-Iran related business over this Iranian fund. So, and historically, they do come to the U.S. government. You've heard from U.S. officials that for these transactions, they do run them by the U.S. government before they release them. But as you said, the reality is, when these funds are released to the non-Iranian companies to send agricultural commodities to Iran, don't be fooled by that. They're not going to be taking those agricultural commodities and throw them in the market. They're going to sell them domestically at higher price, at very high price domestically, and it translates into funds for the regime to spend in other. I don't think I wouldn't oppose to using those funds for agricultural food commodities. Those are exempt from sanctions, not presidential authorities, but legislations that authorize these type of transactions and exempt them from sanctions. But the reality is the Iranian regime is going to receive these shipments and sell them in the domestic market, and not it wouldn't be just kind of a type of commodities that would really help the Iranians right away.
So even if they can siphon off some additional funds for their own coffers, you say that...
absolutely.
Yeah, well, you have that dilemma, and on top of that, Iran could pull, according to some analysts, up to $10 billion worth of assets from oil sales over the next 2 months, because part of this deal, the United States does allow them to collect revenue now on selling their oil. So if you combine that with whatever proceeds they get from these frozen assets, is that enough to prop up a government which, as you noted, at the same time is facing 70% inflation, has a real economic challenge on its hands at home with unemployment? Could this fill that void? Can you hear me, Miad?
I can hear you now. Sorry, I lost you for a second. I can hear you now. So I mean, you're making a good point. I'm less worried about the frozen funds, because I know how to release. They take time. The transactions go very slow. I'm more worried about what you mentioned, the waivers, the authorization for Iranians to sell oil and get paid in U.S. dollars. That's very new. Since 2012, this is the first time that U.S. government is authorizing Iranians to get paid in U.S. dollars. So that's very important. Yes, they're probably have about $8 billion worth of oil in international water that they can now sell to, I would say, mostly, if not all, to the Chinese buyers. That's their main market. 90% to 100% of their oil go to China. I don't think you're going to have new buyers like Indians and others come to this Iranian oil market, because it's only a 60-day waiver and might not get renewed. But they have a lot of funds that are going to get released to them in not just oil, but petrochemicals that now they're allowed to sell under this authorization.
Yeah, and it's, as you noted, something that hasn't been happening since 2012 that they've been allowed to do, even under the JCPOA, which President Trump, as you know, has been highly critical of. At least for the next 60 days, this allows them to do something the JCPOA did not at the time. Miad Maleki, thank you so much. Really appreciate the time.